Okay, now coming to the requirements. So there are 8 clauses in ISO 13485. Class 1, 2, 3 talks about generic scope. What are the references we need to see to implement this standard, and what are the terms and definition used in 13485? That is what addressed in class 1, 2, 3. The 4 to 8 are all the requirement class. 4 talks about quality management system, 5 management responsibility, 6 resource management, 7 product realization, and 8 measurement, analysis, and improvement. If you look at this title, you can able to match, or you can able to correlate this with plan, do, check, act. Correct? So 4, 5, 6 plan, 7 is do, 8 is check and act. Right? We could always figure this out. So now coming to the scope. So we have already discussed this in our previous slides. So if you do any one or more of this particular life cycle stage, you are eligible for 13485. This one I would like to highlight here. Whatever the role you are playing, sometimes you may not do everything in-house. You are going to do a lot of outsourcing activity, subcontracting activity, right? In such situation, your organization is fully responsible and accounted for complying applicable regulatory requirement and also complying this 13485 standard. We cannot say that we have outsourced, so we are not responsible. You are fully responsible and you are held accountable for this, right? And this standard, unless otherwise specified by the regulatory authorities, you are free to exclude the design and development. That is class number 7.3. That is the only class we can exclude if your regulator allows that. Otherwise, all the requirements are applicable to you. We cannot exclude, but there are also giving a provision non-applicable clause. Some organization, let's take EMS industry, so they just make a PCB board, some box build assemblies, and deliver the product to the customer. They don't do any sterilization. There are some requirement in the standard which talks about how to deal the sterile medical device. So we can say this is not applicable to us. Some organization may not handle the implantable or active implantable devices. So there are some requirements. The standard talks about how to deal with this implantable devices. So you can always claim it is not applicable. There is a difference between exclusion and not applicable. Exclusion is only limited to design and development. That is limited to 7.3 of ISO 13485. But in between any clause number 7, 8, 9, you are free to claim non-applicability, but you have to again justify. It doesn't harm your role, what you have claimed already. That's what all about this particular standard. If you want to know any exact terms and definition, don't search in Google or Wikipedia. Refer ISO 9000. I'm repeating, ISO 9000. This is a basic standard which gives the fundamentals and vocabulary, right? So there are some other terms and definition used in the standard specific to medical devices. That is what addressed in section 3. So here we have defined what do you mean by regulatory requirement. This is the definition. We have already discussed this, correct? Anything related to safety, performance of the medical device, right? We're not talking about the end safety of personnel, safety of operator. Is safety and performance of the medical device. That's what the whole regulatory requirement when it's come to medical device. Now, what is medical device? Here I have shown some pictures. There are 3 pictures here, right? Contact lens, colored contact lens, the piercing, tattoos, whatever you call them as. Now tell me, is this a medical device? All these 3 are medical device. So here, which one is medical device? Just type. Contact lenses. How about the second picture? Okay, so now I'll tell you who will decide whether it is a medical device, it is not a medical device. Who decides it? That's the very important question we need to address when we are implementing the standard, when we are implementing the 13485. Yes, of course, regulatory body. In India, the regulatory body notifies very few devices as a medical device, correct? In such situation, who decides it? If you look at in India, I'll put this way. Now we are, most of the people are using now fitness band, right? Do you think this fitness band is a medical device? Okay, so let's take a next thing. So medical device are varies, right? It starts from contact lenses to condoms, even our pregnancy test kits, various machineries. So we use a lot of medical devices in normal hospital or even home environment. So this medical device varies different ranges. These are all, we call them as medical devices. But this is the definition given in 1345. Let's have a look here. Then we will ask the same question to us again. Any instrument, apparatus, implement, machine, appliance, implant, reagent for in vitro use, software, material, or other similar or related article intended by the manufacturer. I am repeat that word again. Intended by the manufacturer to be used alone or in combination for human beings for one or more of the specific medical purposes. There are various purposes they have given here: diagnosis, prevention, lot of things. Now again I go back to the same question. So now we are using fitness bands. Let's take Apple Watch. The Apple Watch is a medical device. Can anyone answer? The recent edition of Apple Watch can take ECG, correct? So do you think ECG is a medical device? Look at the definition. Look at the definition. One or more, one or more, either diagnosis or prevention or just monitor, right? Look at this. Investigation, replacement, modification. So who will decide it's a medical device or not? It's purely the designer or manufacturer. What is the intended use? That is a key word I would like to highlight here. Then regulators will decide whether that needs to be regulated or not. Okay, so a product is classified or defined under medical device. It has to fit the definition made by the concerned regulators, and they will decide what type of regulation to be deployed. That's what I would like to highlight here. And which is not medical device. Any product, the primary intended action by pharmacological, immunological, metabolic means, right? Those can be not considered as a medical device. Medicinal purposes, right? Those are all not part of medical device. Even this definition can vary country to country. Recently, MDR, right? The MDR 17, they call as combination of medicinal product can be treated as a medical device. So it's vary country to country. So now some of the key words we need to, because these words we are going to use in the standard: implantable medical device, active implantable medical device, in vitro medical device. Yeah, yes, correct. Monitor physical fitness. How about ECG? What ECG does then? So we'll keep your questions. We'll answer it later, right? So implantable medical device. So we all aware about these type of medical devices, right? Sometime you might have heard about this, or you might have used somewhere when you are in hospital. So there are a lot of different types of medical devices exist. So this standard is applicable to all these medical devices. Either you play any one role. Either you design or produce or manufacture or service or do installation or build software for those products or doing validation services for those products. So the standard is fully applicable. That's what the standard. Now coming to the requirements. So there are 8 clauses. So four starts with, you need to have a document, a QMS. The entire QMS needs to be documented. We have already seen what is document. Document needs to be established, implemented, maintained. That's what all about, right? So we need to establish the requirements, establish the procedure, establish the activity required by the standard in line with applicable regulatory requirement. So document what is your role, declare it, and this is what I would like to emphasize. The word regulatory requirement is appearing 37 times in the standard. In the earlier version of the same 13485, it appears 9 times, but this time it appears 37 times. In the requirement alone, class 4 to 8 in between this. So the whole intent of 13485, have a QMS for regulatory purpose. That's it. So within your organization, you must ask yourself, do we have a process to identify the applicable regulatory requirements? How we are going to evaluate those regulatory requirements? Because regulatory requirements are keep on getting changed, right? So how these changes impacted our product, impacted our role? So these questions we need to ask on our own. Then we need to comply, right? These are the 3 things we have to highlight. So this is addressed in very basic class 4. When you are establishing QMS, you have to consider this. Then determine what are the processes needed for your quality management system. When you say processes, it's all your manufacturing process, marketing, purchasing, whatever the functions you are having in your organization, that's what it is. Okay, so then risk-based approach. So this is very much reflected in the standard. The risk-based approach, it is not just at one particular stage. I'm just consolidating in which are the places the word risk-based approach is needed. Look at this. In this previous class 4.1.2, it says the entire quality management system, to control your processes, you need to have a risk-based approach. That's a very general statement. But if you look at this 4.1.5, outsourcing process. When you do outsource your manufacturing activity, you have to apply risk. Whatever the controls you are going to adopt, it should be based on the risks. Then software validation. So when you do validate your software, again, you have to consider risk. When you are verifying the training effectiveness, consider the risk. When you develop a new product, when you are planning your product realization, consider risk. When you design and develop a product, consider risk. When you are selecting a supplier, consider the risk. When you do incoming inspection, consider the risk. So these are the various places the risk-based approach is insisted by this 13485. So then there are some general requirements. Whatever the process you identified, make sure the process is operated as per plan, do, check, act. Then changes. Any changes happened in your quality management system, you need to evaluate what is the impact of the change in my QMS. What is the impact on my medical device because of this change? How it will deviate or non-complying the regulatory requirements. Consider every aspect, each and every change happened in your quality management system. You need to review this. Then 415 clearly dictate that if you outsource any process, you are fully responsible then there should be a written quality agreement. This is one additional requirement in 13485. You should have a written quality agreement, how to manage the outsourcing processes, what type of control you want to exercise. That should be part of your written quality agreement. So these are all the requirements in class 4. And there is one more requirement: if you use any software, computer software, throughout the standard, various places, the software usage is addressed. I'll list this one by one. Look at this. In 4.1.6, they talks about if you are using any software in your quality management system, that needs to be validated. Can you name some software what you are using in your quality management system? Software used in QMS. Do you use any software or computer application for QMS? Yeah, it can be SAP, Minitab, lot of softwares, right? For quality management system. That's what I would like to highlight. So we cannot have a two different system in an organization, only one QMS. So in your organization, even ERPs, right? That can be treated as a software. Then, are you using any software for your production process, for your manufacturing process? Again, that software needs to be validated. Then, are you using any software for your testing, calibration, verification purpose? Again, that needs to be validated. So the standard mandated that we need to validate all these computer application or software based on the risk. How much risk this software can pose on my medical device. That's what whole concept of this particular class. Then we must have some documents. What are the documents? You have highlighted in the initially, right? There are 4 level of document you are maintaining in your company. Some organization maintain 5 level of document. So these are those documents. We must have a quality policy and quality objective. We must have a quality manual. There are a lot of documented procedures, documented records required by this 13485. If you look at other management system like ISO 9001, they don't need any procedure. The word procedure is not appeared in the standard, but here they use that word documented procedures and records. There are a lot of procedures needed by the standard, maybe around 25 or 26. It depends on what is the role you are playing. There are a lot of documents and records needed by your organization. You can define your own documents, and we have to establish all this document. You have to control all this document. You have to maintain all this document. And of course, regulatory requirement, they have their own requirements. What are the document as an organization you have to retain or maintain? So everything needs to be addressed. And there should be a quality manual, a mandatory quality manual you should have. The quality manual must declare what is your scope. What are the classes not applicable? If you are excluding design, why you are excluding? The justification. What are the processes you have in your company? How it interact each others? What are the procedures you have adopted? What is the documentation structure you follow? Everything should be addressed in your quality manual. Then this is a new requirement, which is not there in the other quality management system. This is medical device file. For each medical device or each medical device type or family, you must maintain this medical device file. The purpose of this medical device file is you need to prove that you are conforming the regulatory requirement, you are conforming this 13485 requirement. So what should be the content of medical device file? They give you some minimum requirement. Based on your role, this is applicable. If a company is not doing any installation, this is may not applicable. If you're not doing service, leave it. But look at this first 4. This is shall requirement. You must address this. Right? So what is the intended use or purpose of the medical device? What is the description of the device? How to label it? What is the instruction for use? What is the specification? What are the acceptance criteria? What is the procedure for production, handling, storage, packaging? So these are all the mandatory requirements. So you have to compile everything and you call them as medical device file. So these are all the requirements in class 4. Then this is the pretty old document control, record control, how we are going to deal. But here I would like to highlight a few requirements, especially these two particular requirements. Changes to your quality management system document, who is going to do this change? Is the original originator or whoever you are assigning? Make sure those approval person or approval authority must have access to the information why this change was initiated, what is the impact of this change, right? That particular clarity is needed when you are approving a change. And how many years you are going to retain the obsolete documents, you should define it. I think the other standards is more focusing on retention of records, but 13485 is also expecting us to define your own period, how you are going to retain the document, mainly the earlier version of the documents that needs to be addressed. And this period should be in line with the at least the lifetime of the medical device and not less than the record retention period. So this I would like to highlight here. When it's come to control of records, again there is a specific requirement how you are going to maintain the confidentiality of health information. Sometime when you do clinical evaluation, sometime when you do performance evaluation, you may deal with lot of health information about patients information, right? So how we are going to deal with that? You have to maintain confidentiality. Then record retention, again at least the lifetime of the medical device plus 2 calendar years or whatever you decide as per the regulatory requirement, you have to retain the record, but it's not less than 2 years from the device release date. So these are all the requirement in class 4. So when you are establishing QMS, you have to consider all these requirements. Then class 5 talks about management responsibility. So here it starts with management commitment, customer focus. We must have a quality policy, then planning of QMS, establishing measurable quality objective for every QMS process, what you have identified in class 4, then QMS planning. These are a very generic requirement, but this one 1345 has some additional requirements. Top management must ensure responsibilities authorities are defined, documented, communicated to the concerned persons. And people who are doing inspection activity, testing activity, they must be proven that they are independent and they do have an authority, right? For example, in your organization, the quality manager or the quality team reporting to whom? Can you just specify the hierarchy in your organizational hierarchy, whom the quality manager is reports? With respect to medical device, I'm talking about the medical devices production line or the medical device inspection. The quality manager or the quality team reports to who? Is it to operations or they reports to production? Then you have to relook this particular class. Just relook the class, what it says. So they should be independent and they should have an authority to perform the task. Without any influence, they have to perform this inspection and testing. That's what all about this class, right? And MR 13485 retains the position for MR. We need a person from a management as a management representative. Top management needs to nominate them. So there are some specific roles what MR needs to do. MR has to ensure the processes needed for QMS are properly documented. When I say documented, again, appropriate document, documented procedures, everything should be established, right? Then management review at planned intervals, we have to conduct management review meeting, but there are some new agenda point we could say. This is not in the earlier or the other standards, other management system standard. Complaint handling processes, reporting to the regulatory authorities. What are the new or revised regulatory requirements with respect to medical devices? This needs to be reviewed in your in the management review meeting. In addition to that, your management review outcome must also address how we are going to respond to those changes, to the regulatory requirements. So these are some of the few points we need to focus in 13485. Then resource management. The human resource, there is no additional big requirement. Make sure people are enough competent. Consider risk here also. When you are doing training effectiveness, consider risk factor. Then infrastructure and work environment. There are a lot of additional requirements here in 13485. So based on your role, based on your medical device, and based on the regulatory requirement, you need to prevent the product mix-up. And you have to maintain not only the machineries used in production, you need to also maintain the production instrument, work environment related instruments, machineries like HVAC, your control room systems, right? Then this work environment, you have to clearly determine what is the requirement for work environment. What type of cleanliness I need to maintain? What is the clothing of personnel? So based on your product, based on the risk, we have to ensure adequate work environment is in place. The temperatures, humidity, it is not going to harm your product. That's what the ultimate requirement. Then contamination control. This is a completely new requirement. So we have to control the contaminated or potentially contaminated product. For example, if there is a risk of a contamination with microorganisms or particulate matter, then we have to maintain proper cleanliness. Then sterilization comes into picture. Okay, so how many of your products goes for sterilization? Here, any one of your product undergoes the sterilization process? Can anyone just respond? Any of your process or any of your product, or even if you're outsourcing this particular activity, sterilization, anyone does this? Typically, most of the medical devices used in critical cares or sterile products, it depends on what is the role you are playing. So we can simply say, hey, the 6.4.2 application for sterile medical device is not applicable. The non-applicability can be claimed here, but we cannot exclude this. Right? Then class 7. So class 7 talks about product realization. 7.1, planning of product realization. Again, this is nothing to do with the production planning. This is how we are going to plan the entire product realization. Product realization means concept to disposal. So we must have a processes. So what are the process? I need to develop a product, to manufacture a product, to install, to provide service of this product. I have to consider this. Then risk management. In 4.1, we have seen a risk management, that is risk management with respect to quality management system processes. But here, look at this. Here we should have a risk management for product realization. So the standard expecting us one or more processes for risk management. In note, they have given, you can refer ISO 14971. So there is a separate standard available, ISO 14971. Medical devices, application of risk management to medical devices. There are a lot of risk management standard exist. ISO 31000 is there, general risk management standard, right? But this one is specific to medical device. And there is a guideline also how to implement, how to use this ISO 14971. So this standard is giving a big picture. It simply asks us to do 4 important tasks. Identify the hazard in your medical device, estimate and evaluate the risk associated with the hazard, then control the hazards and risks, and monitor the effectiveness. These are the 4 important steps they are expecting from us to do in a systematic way. And implementing this ISO 14971 is voluntary. It is not a mandatory requirement. If you read the standard, they ask either one or more risk management methodology. It is not always this particular standard, but there are some regulators who recognizes this as a standard. That way it will become a mandatory for you, right? So how many of you are practicing this standard in your organization, ISO 14971? Anyone implementing this as part of your risk management? Risk management for medical devices. Okay, see, US FDA, even Health Canada, and some part of European countries mandated this approach of risk management. It depends on the role what you do. So this is not a certifiable standard. It's only a guideline. It tells us how to do your risk management. That's all. So the standard gives you a structured outline. So the entire life cycle, this risk management needs to be applied. Either you are doing only design, you can adopt this. It can be applied anywhere in the supply chain. And this is the approach what they are recommending. So first analyze the risk, evaluate the risk, then control the risk, evaluate the overall residual risk after your control, then does a risk management review. After this, conduct post-market survey, get feedback from the field, then you decide whether your risks are mitigated, controlled effectively. So this is what the standard. And this is only voluntary, not mandatory. You can adopt this if you want. Then 7.2. This is customer related process. How you are going to deal with your customer, how you are going to determine the requirements of the product. So here you need to pay more attention, because most of the time you are just a manufacturer or you are just a service provider. So it is your responsibility to go and ask your customer, is there any applicable regulatory requirement for the product? The product what I am going to deliver, is there any regulatory requirement? Your customer may be from anywhere in the globe, right? So you need to ask the country specific regulatory requirement. If you forget to capture here, then tomorrow you're going to suffer. So pay more focus and attention when you do this determination of requirement related to the product. Then also check, is there any user training is needed to ensure the specified performance safe use of medical device. And this is the input for putting those instructions. You need to also ask, what is the competency level of people who is going to use this medical device, right? So this needs to be determined and that needs to be reviewed. Then there should be a proper communication channel with your customer. The very important communication here is advisory notices. What do you mean by advisory notices? Do you heard about this advisory notices in medical devices domain? Have you came across any, can you give some example of advisory notices which you heard recently with respect to medical device I'm talking about? Okay. You heard about Johnson & Johnson implants? Recently, yeah, few of them have heard about this. They have given this advisory notices. That's a recent example we could say. See, advisory notices are issued by the organization. It is not issued by the regulators. It is only issued by the company. After delivering of a medical device, to provide some supplementary information or some advice. It may be, it is not always a negative advisory notices. It's just, look at the word, it's advice. So this is given by the manufacturer for the purpose of how to use a medical device, or is there any modification of a medical device, or return the device, recall, right? We heard about this automotive product recall, na? Similar to that. Sometimes they will say, don't use this device, destruct it. So advisory notices can be anything. It is not always recall. It is combination of anything, but it is always issued by the organization, not by the regulator. So this communication channel we need to adopt. So how we are going to, tomorrow if you want to issue in advisory notices, how we are going to reach your customers? If you have lot number traceability, you can reach them, right? If it is released to open market, how you are going to reach them? So we should have a process. So then design and development 7.3, here we can exclude with proper justification and ensure your regulatory authority also allows you to exclude this. So there are various phases here: design plan, input, output, review, verification, validation, transfer, then change management, then design and development files. Here few requirements are very crucial in medical devices industry. One is design and development planning. When you do planning, that time also you have to ensure what is the method for traceability of your design and development output and input, like requirement traceability matrix. Make sure everything is compliant. Because if you forget to address any one regulatory requirement, then the consequence will be huge. Then when you do design and development input, consider functional requirement, performance requirement, safety requirements, regulatory requirements, right? Then your design and development output should clear information should reach your next processes, like when you are purchasing a product, when you are manufacturing a product. So we need to clearly communicate the requirements. The design verification and design validation. During this design verification and validation, if your product needs to be connected or it has any interaction or interface with other medical device, you need to prove that your product is verified, validated against those interfaces. That's very critical requirement you have to consider. And this is design and development validation. There is a mandatory requirement. As part of design and development validation, your company must perform clinical evaluation or performance evaluation. There are two options we have in front of us. Again, it depends on applicable regulatory requirements. In some country, the regulatory requirements are very clear. These products has to undergo clinical evaluation. Then we have to go. If there is no such requirement, you decide what type of methodology you want to adopt. Right? And you cannot release your design unless your product is either clinically evaluated or you need to prove that your product is evaluated for its performance. Then design and development transfer. This is like a design transfer. So once you prove your design is validated through clinical evaluation or clinical trials, whatever, you need to transfer the complete information to the manufacturing, right? That's what this whole class is. Then any changes, make sure it is properly reviewed, verified, validated, and approved. Then maintain a design and development file. This is different from medical device file, what we have seen in class 4. So class 4 medical device file is the entire life cycle. It starts from designing, production, manufacturing, installation, service. Whereas here we talks about only about design and development files. Maybe this is also one of the input for your technical file. When you build technical file for your CE marking, right? This can be considered one of the input. Then purchase. So while selecting a supplier, evaluating a supplier, re-evaluating a supplier, consider risk. When you are placing a purchase order or contract, make sure the quality agreements are part of it. When you do incoming inspection, apply risk here again. Right? Then production. So you have to prove that whatever the product you produces, it meets the specification. How to do this? The standard gives you a methodology. There are a lot of bulletin points in 7.5.1 that needs to be complied. Then a lot of additional requirements here in class 7.5, cleanliness, how to do installation, service activity. Then there are some specific requirements for sterile medical device, and one requirement I would like to highlight here, validation of processes. This is also called as special process validation. So yesterday, if you have attended this other training, we have discussed something about special process, right? How to validate a special process. That's what addressed here. And there are some specific requirements how to validate the sterilization and the sterile barrier systems. And there are some specific requirements with respect to identification and traceability. Then how to deal customer property, how to preserve the product, then calibration of our monitoring, measuring equipments. So these are all the various classes addressed under 7.5. Here I would take this particular class 756 special processes. So yesterday we have discussed, right, a lot of processes are special processes where the output cannot be verified by any subsequent measurement monitoring, then that is called as special processes like soldering, welding, right? There are various special processes. In your organization, are you doing any special process? Can you name some special process what you does in your company? Coating, okay. What else? Soldering, gluing, welding, hand soldering, potting, passivation, welding, bonding, all ink, right? Coating, right? So various processes you do, right? Now, what medical devices industry does is now, have you heard about this particular processes? These are the some of the critical process technologies exist in medical devices industry. PCB assemblies, cable harness, heat treatment, injection molding is a special process. Resin is a special process. The entire sterilization is a special process. Welding is a special process. And there are future critical process technologies to produce these process. So what medical device industry does is they have recently launched a program called as MedAccred. They heard about them? MedAccred? Anyone of here? MedAccred. So this is a completely new accreditation program launched by medical devices industry. See, this is what MedAccred. This is industry managed critical process supplier assurance program.